Hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, in whichever part of the world. Uh, Today, in this session of our annual event Connect Karo, we'll be talking about safer streets, safer cities. And we'll be discussing the role of streets in ensuring a safer, equitable, and inclusive city. We also look at the investment priorities, policy supports for making our streets safer, as well as how can we move beyond pilots to achieve transformation at scale. We have seen a lot of cities, not only from India, from around the world, have done some great pilots on street design. But we are also interested to see how can we move beyond these pilots, because what we want is transformation at scale. And so that will be the theme of today's discussion. And before I move forward, I really wanted to thank Bloomberg Philanthropy for all their support over the years. It's been more than 10 years, at least in India, that we've been getting this generous support from Bloomberg Philanthropies. We also have a very small, short video which shows a glimpse of our work at WRI-India, which we have done in some other cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore under the Bloomberg Philanthropy Initiative of Global Road Safety. And these projects actually showcase the importance of looking street as a shared resource for all road users, not only those who are in their motor vehicle. So let's have a video first, and then we can kickstart the conversation.
Streets play a vital role in our day-to-day lives. Not only are they conduits for traffic, streets are also where we meet, celebrate festivals, and grow businesses. But the simple act of walking on streets today has turned into a dangerous activity in our cities. It is estimated that 62 pedestrians die on Indian roads every day, even though more than half of all trips in cities like Mumbai is on foot. Pedestrians are rarely considered in a city's planning process.
Every day, pedestrians are squeezed out of spaces to walk by the sheer pressure of increasing vehicles in our cities. But these pedestrians haven't disappeared. They are now forced to share road space with moving traffic. This not only reduces traffic efficiency, but it's also putting pedestrians' lives at risk.
Under the Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety, WRI India started working with local governments in 2015 to make our streets safer, more accessible and inclusive. It started with the transformation of HP Junction in Mumbai in 2017. Traffic was streamlined, pedestrian infrastructure was provided, and vehicular conflicts reduced. The success was translated to several junctions across Mumbai, including Nagpada, Padala, Lalbagh, and Bharat Mata, to name a few. In 2019, the work expanded to Delhi with the transformation of the Delhi Gate Junction, one of the most dangerous spots in the city. WRI India is also proud to partner with the government for the transformation of 540 kilometers of streets. And further south in Bengaluru, WRI India partnered with the Directorate of Urban Land Transport, as well as the Traffic Police, BBMP, and bicycle ambassadors to implement India's first ever pop-up bicycle lane on the busy outer ring road. WRI India was also part of the project with Bengaluru Smart City to create cycle tracks and pedestrian infrastructure at Racecourse Road and Raj Bhavan Road.
The problem is not that our cities do not have space on streets. The problem is that our streets are not designed for people. What our cities really need is an integrated transport and mobility plan that places priority on moving people, not vehicles.
So with this video, we're just trying to showcase a glimpse of our work. So I hope you like it. And before I move forward, I would also request and invite all the speakers and participants to look at the Safer Street booth at Connect Karo virtual platform. And this will give you an idea of our work in the road safety space. Okay, so let's move forward. And I will now like to invite Ms. Kelly Larson for her keynote address. To introduce Kelly, I've known Kelly for almost over a decade now. She has over 30 years of experience in managing local, national, and international public health programs. She currently actually directs the Bloomberg Philanthropies Road Safety, Drowning Prevention, and Partnership for Healthy Cities program, while also providing technical support to partners and grantees in the Tobacco Control Initiative. So joining line for New York, Kelly, welcome and over to you.
Thank you so much, Amit. And just want to confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, Kelly, we can see your screen and we can hear you as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And good evening to all of you in India, and good morning to those of you who are joining from the US, and good afternoon for those in between. Thank you so much for inviting me to kick off the Safer Streets and Safer Cities session for Connect Karo. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the discussion and also sharing about our strategy within the Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety. I'd like to just set the stage first to talk a bit about Bloomberg Philanthropies and our Road Safety Initiative, and then to go into our strategy for scaling up transformations in cities around the world. So just for background, for those of you who don't know us, Bloomberg Philanthropies is located in New York City and is the foundation of Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City and founder of Bloomberg LP, which is a financial and communications company. Our goal is to ensure better, longer lives for the greatest number of people, and what a better program than road safety to really fit that mission. We work across the globe, and you can see here locations where we work across all of our programs: arts, education, environment, government, innovation, and public health. We have a very large investment in India in road safety and across many of our other programs from the foundation. I wanted to talk a bit about our approach for supporting public health issues, and really road safety fits this bill perfectly. We look for unmet needs, and we have supported road safety since 2007. And back in 2007, very few funders were supporting road safety, and very few governments were prioritizing road safety. So since 2007, we've been very pleased to see an increased commitment across not only foundations, but more importantly, governments. We rely on data to drive our work. Mike always says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And when it comes to safer streets and safer cities, data plays a huge role in not only identifying the outcomes of the work, but for assisting in scale. We don't shy away from controversy, and we utilize advocacy and lobbying. One of the big roles in road safety is to really pressure governments to strengthen road safety laws, and we're really proud of the work that was done in India in the passage of the Motor Vehicles Amendment Bill in 2019. A huge win, and we're really excited about the outcomes of that law. We work with strong partners. Thank you to WRI for, as Amit, you mentioned, we've been partners for, I believe it's 11 years now, and we appreciate all of WRI's support in road safety and across our environment portfolio. And we also work with other partner organizations: Global Designing Cities Initiative, the World Bank, particularly those three organizations on our Safer Streets and Safer Mobility. We remain flexible. Flexibility is key. In some instances, we have to double down on our work, and in other instances, we have to walk away because of political situations. And then we focus on cities. With Mike's experience as mayor, we really follow the formula that New York City ensured success from, and we really see cities as instrumental in all of our programs. So just want to share a bit more about our public health initiatives. Road safety is the second largest program that we support. We've funded programs primarily in non-communicable diseases and injuries, road safety and drowning prevention. And Mike Bloomberg is the WHO Global Ambassador for NCDs and injuries, and we really work hard to use his voice to push governments to support NCDs and injuries. We have committed $500 million to decrease road traffic fatalities and injuries, and the Safer Streets and Safer Mobility efforts play a big part within that commitment. We're currently in the second year of a 6-year program that is working with 15 countries and 28 cities to reduce road traffic fatalities. We have worked in India since 2010 and will continue to support national level legislative work in India through 2025. And you'll see that we are supporting New Delhi, Mumbai, and Maharashtra State and Bengaluru on the implementation of evidence-based road safety interventions, which includes our Safer Streets and Safer Mobility efforts. We have, basically apply the same strategy across all countries, across all cities, and really see the networking and sharing of lessons as instrumental in the work that we're supporting. This is a busy slide, but just want to give you a sense of what we support. And I've circled here the solutions that we'll be talking about today: road design, speed management, and implementation and data that play such a big part of our initiative, and that really ensure the work of designing cities for people, not cars, takes place across cities around the world. So I want to just set the stage a bit for the rest of this session. Really looking forward to hearing from the panelists, from experts in India, as well as the discussion in this session. But basically, scaling up doesn't happen overnight, and it really requires a long-term sustained commitment. And at Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've been supporting the scaling up and transformation of cities since 2010, and we'll continue to support that. And really partnering with strong organizations such as WRI, GDCI, the World Bank, really having that comprehensive approach has certainly increased outcomes. So I just want to talk about a bit of the key components when it comes to scaling up transformations. And you'll see to the right some photos that were in the video of the work of WRI, where WRI has been able to work with city governments to really transform specific areas of the city. And we know that they're working very hard to scale up throughout Bengaluru, Delhi, and Mumbai, and Maharashtra State. So one of the key components, and there are 6, I have 2 slides just to start the discussion, it's capacity building, really needing to ensure that we equip city staff and practitioners with technical tools and strategies. We have been working in Mumbai since 2015 and have trained more than 1,000 engineers on best practices and design guidance. And we recognize the importance of increasing capacity to ensure not only sustainability, but also scale. We also, as I mentioned, need to utilize baseline data and analyze the outcomes of this work to not only highlight the impact of the work, but also to promote scaling up of specific measures. And we appreciate the work that WRI does in ensuring that data is collected for all of the work that they do, so that we can push governments to scale up and use these as important examples for other work that can be done around the respective cities where they're working. Across all of our road safety programs, multi-agency coordination is critical. We at Bloomberg Philanthropies have ensured that we have the highest level political support, so we have the buy-in from the mayor. We also develop, when I say we, it's our partners and working with our embedded staff and technical leads within different agencies. We work very hard to ensure that there is a coordination of all of these agencies, because it doesn't take just one agency to get this work done. And so it's a lot of work and effort. And it's very important to ensure that we have those relationships and that there is coordination across agencies, so that we can, 1, develop pilots, increase these pilots, and develop the pilots and go to scale. So On this slide, just a continuation of the key strategy. Here are some transformations that were conducted by the Global Designing Cities initiatives, another partner of the Bloomberg Philanthropies, and working closely with cities in Mumbai. So you'll see here CSMT in Mumbai, as well as Myth Chowki intersection. I actually got out there, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, we were painting these streets in about 110-degree weather. It was a great experience, and again, really an important opportunity to showcase what can be done just with a little paint and cones. So another key component of our strategy is to ensure that we create programs to ensure scale up of pilots. So really looking at scale and working with different agencies to develop programs, not just one-off pilots. Policies and design guidance. We really appreciate all of the work that our partners do to develop strong design guidance and making sure that cities update documents to support longer-term change across the spectrum, because with political change, there become different priorities, and really it's essential that policies and design guidance is continually updated. I think in some locations where we work, we see some design guidance that goes back to the 70s or 80s. And so that's really an important role that our partners play in partnering with governments to ensure those are updated. And then just finally, assisting cities to embed processes. We know that transformations take time, and scaling up these transformations really, as I mentioned early, is a long-term sustained commitment. So we work really hard to support the development and revision of everyday processes to ensure efficiency. That too does not happen overnight, but is certainly a very important commitment. I will say, just thinking about Mumbai and the work that our partners have been able to accomplish with the government agencies. It's been a very strong partnership, and we know WRI has had a long-term relationship with the city long before Bloomberg Philanthropies started supporting the work there in 2015. We have, through our partners and the agencies, have improved 19 high-risk locations through infrastructure redesigns. We have 9 more under construction, and 101 more transformations have been submitted by partners to the government for implementation. So when we talk about scaling up, I think Mumbai is a really great example of where we have been able to achieve success, and we're looking forward to that long-term partnership in Delhi and Bengaluru, as well as the other 25 cities where we're working within the Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety. So with that, I'd like to just thank you for allowing me to present on Bloomberg Philanthropies and our Road Safety Initiative, as well as some of our strategy. I think we'll hear more from panelists and get into a bit more detail, but just thank you for all of your commitment to reducing road traffic fatalities and injuries. It takes all of us. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we've come a long way. So thank you very much, and wishing you all the best, and looking forward to seeing you relatively soon. It's been a very challenging 18 months. We've been thinking of you in India for sure. We're in our recovery mode here in New York, and hoping that in 2022 we can all get together and do Connect Karo in person next year. So all the best, and please take care.
Thanks a lot, Kelly, for this wonderful context setting for the follow-up panel discussion, but also for being the champion of road safety and champion of the work that we've been doing. So thanks a lot. Thanks again for joining us for this session. Okay, so let's move forward. We now have a panel discussion, and I would like to introduce my colleague Dhaval Asher, who heads our road safety work, and he will take the conversation forward. So Dhaval, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amit, and thank you, Kelly. First of all, thank you for the support and for sharing this wonderful insights. Okay, so we have a really exciting panel today. We have 4 people from across the country who've been working on sort of various streets and public spaces projects, among other projects, since many years now. And I think it's a good time to sort of talk with them about their experiences and how they think, what is the enabling environment sort of that is needed to kind of scale these efforts, etc. I just wanted to sort of share my screen before I kind of introduce our panelists and just set a little bit of the context for the next 35, 40 minutes. If I may. So, please let me know if you can see my, Amit, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Dhawan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so, sort of the manifestation of all our traffic problems for our decision makers and a large part of the people is congestion. It's congestion, and therefore sort of we need to do something to resolve sort of this problem, aka we're starting to build a lot more roads. But really, who's the real road users? And I think our panelists here are sort of well aware, and most people here. But walking is the biggest mode of commute in Indian cities, followed by buses. Most other cities have two-wheelers as a larger share. And there is no city that has more than 15% mode share of cars. The last 20 years in India, the last sort of from 2010 to this coming decade, 2020, it's the largest investment is going to be in the urban infrastructure, which is sort of roads plus metros. And about 50%, this is a rough estimate, but about 50% of the whole $500 sort of intended investment is going to go into roads, right? Into roads, metros. So, there's going to be a lot of flyovers. There's going to be a lot of expressways and metros. But again, a large part of the investment is also going to go into city roads. This is one such city road in Mumbai, where sort of this is a newly built road. The priority is very clear here. It's for cars, right? But there is sort of high pedestrian demand, etc. What happens to sort of all the other road users? So really, in this context, the conversation that we need to have now, and this decade is very critical, right? Is sort of we need to kind of start scaling up now. Pilots won't work fast enough. We're starting to get locked in so often. So what is sort of the imagination of our streets? How can we move beyond pilots to achieve transformation at scale? And what is the enabling environment that you guys think needs to be created for capacities such as yourselves to be able to scale these efforts, right? So in this context, let me just quickly, I'm going to just stop sharing right now and quickly introduce our panel today. So we have Professor Ashish Varma. Thank you, Professor Varma, for joining. Professor Ashish Varma is the convener of IISC's Sustainable Transportation Lab. He's also a PhD from IIT Bombay and is sort of currently the Associate Professor of Transportation Systems Engineering at the Department of Civil Engineering, Center for Infrastructure, Sustainable Transportation and Urban Planning. Before joining, he served at IIT Guwahati and with the MMRDA here in Mumbai, which is the Metropolitan Region Development Authority. So welcome, Professor Varma. We have with us also, we have Ms. Kalpana Viswanath. Kalpana is a researcher and practitioner on gender inclusive urbanization and women's safety. She is the co-founder and CEO of Safety Pin, which is a social enterprise that uses technology and data to advocate for safe urban spaces for women, with partnerships in more than 25 cities in India and globally. Kalpana is also a member of the Women's Safety Committee of the Delhi government. She's worked as a consultant with the UN Women and UN Habitat on issues of gender and urban safety. So thank you, Kalpana, for joining. Samarth Das, we have Samarth. Samarth is an urban designer and architect in Mumbai. He's sort of a graduate in architecture and urban design from Columbia University in the US. Samarth's work focuses on engaging public and private sector to design shared spaces within cities that promote participation and interaction amongst people. Samarth is currently working on projects that include the rejuvenation of Irla Nala here in Mumbai, in a suburb in Juhu, and comprehensive tourism plans for the city's sort of beaches. His work includes design of the new government offices for the state of Maharashtra, master planning and design of Motilal Nagar district in Goregaon, which is a suburb in Mumbai. Welcome, Samarth. Thanks for joining. And we have Sarika Panda. Sarika is a director in Nagaro and a founder trustee of the Rahagiri Foundation. I think we all are now aware of what Rahagiri is. Sarika is the founder and trustee of this great initiative. Sarika is leading the Rahagiri Day movement in Haryana across all cities and districts now. She's also helping other cities replicate this hugely successful concept. Sarika is leading the NMT, or the non-motorized work, and the India Vision Zero work in Haryana and Punjab, and has about 15 years of experience in this field of urban development, transport, environment, and architecture. And she was also selected as one of the 60 global women leaders in the world who's making a change in how we move in our cities. So welcome and thank you for joining, Sarika. Okay, so I want to sort of just start. I think we'll kind of just quickly do some opening remarks with everyone. I think if we can take a couple of minutes across the room to just talk about, one is sort of your imagination of the city, the streets and public spaces and so on, and some of the work that you have done, maybe some key experiences that you want to quickly share with us so that we kind of get into the conversation. So we start with Professor Varma.
Thanks, Dhaval. Hope I am audible. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, thanks to you and WRI for inviting me. Let's get to the topic itself. And I would my inputs or my thoughts would basically come from some of the important projects that I have been involved, where streets, pedestrians, active mobility has been the strong focus of what we have been doing. One is Church Street First. This was a very interesting pilot that happened in Bengaluru during this COVID time between November and February, November 2020 and February 2021, where this whole Church Street, which is right in the heart of the, it's a busy street right in the heart of Bengaluru, was pedestrianized. And it was used not just as a core transportation policy intervention, but also as a test bed to showcase how such measures have impact on quality of life. In fact, we have, my research lab has produced an impact assessment report on how it impacts quality of life. It runs into 500 pages, and it would get formally released next week itself on Church Street itself. Hopefully, people will be able to see. And we have showcased, what we are talking really in terms of the theme of this session is ensuring safer, equitable, and inclusive, city. How such interventions actually lead to that, and how it has been measured, actually by through such impact assessment. The second project was about understanding the health impact of transport. We actually, and among that health impact, not just the exposure to pollutants, but also the fatalities, especially on vulnerable road users. So on the fatality part, since it was also highlighted by the keynote speaker Kelly, we actually did collect the whole FIRs of all the accidents that have happened in Bengaluru over multiple years, almost 6-7 years continuously. We extracted and churned the data. Using that, what we tried to understand first was who are the vulnerable road users. And interestingly, it's, shockingly, I would say, not interestingly, 90% fatalities are either pedestrian or two-wheelers, out of which about 45% are pedestrians, almost half of. And I see it's almost a similar figure in Mumbai also. Further, with that data, we created a crash, fatality risk model, which essentially models how, with the change in passenger kilometers by different modes, you can actually change the number of fatalities in the city using this empirical data of past cities. And in one of the scenarios, which was a high mode share in terms of passenger kilometer on buses, actually resulted in the maximum reduction in not just the total fatalities, but also the fatalities of these vulnerable road users. So it actually works out to be a win-win situation in pushing more mode share on buses to essentially not just serve the mobility solutions and improve that, but also serves as a important way to reduce fatalities of vulnerable road users. That was the second thing. Third thing was we did a project called Climatrans, where over the network level, which is what we're trying to see how we scale these things at the city level. we kind of model using a macro simulation model that using infrastructure of walking and cycling as a specific intervention together with other interventions in a bundle in a sort of push and pull strategies, how much of mitigation of carbon and other local pollutants that we can achieve at the network level. And what we could see in the best scenario for Bengaluru was that carbon emissions can get mitigated from comparing from a business as usual scenario by more than 90%, and other pollutants like PM 2.5, etc., in the range of 70 to 80%. So that's the mitigation potential that one can have with these kind of strategies. So this actually sums up, what we can really gain by focusing on streets. And when we are focusing on streets, I'll just take a couple of minutes more, Dhaval, to just put my point in perspective. We have to think in a much broader terms, not just as a transport policy. How does it impact quality of life in the cities? How this intervention adds to the quality of life? How this intervention adds to the air quality action plan? How this intervention adds to the health plan, of say health department of the city. So I think, if you have to translate into actionable plans at the city level, from learning from these pilots, I think we should push the safer street concept into the integral part of the action plan of air quality in the city, also in the integral plan of the health department's action plan to improve the mental as well as physical well-being of people. I think this is the way we would really push a much larger and more comprehensive narrative of how these safer streets can lead to an overall impact and a holistic impact. Just the last thing, we need explicit metrics to make our decision makers, politicians and executive understand the impacts. It could be mode share. How do we reach the mode share of say 85% of public transport, walking, cycling together? It should be in terms of tailpipe emissions, how much you reduce with these kind of interventions at the network level. And it should also be in terms of fatalities of vulnerable road users, how much and to what extent you reduce them by introducing. So I think these metrics would really help these decision makers to get a real sense. I'll stop here for now. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Professor Varma. These are interesting raise, and we'll speak more about actually these points as we move ahead. But let's move to Kalpana, who's actually sort of doing very, very important but very different kind of work. So Kalpana, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, WRI, for having me part of this event. When we talk about safer streets from a gender perspective, we need to take I like the concept of well-being, but what we're talking about when we talk about gendered well-being, or well-being from the perspective of women and other maybe non-binary genders, we are talking about how do we make our streets more equitable. And when you have unsafe streets, not just, in terms of fatalities and accidents, but for women, the notion of unsafe streets extends beyond that. It also extends to fear of violence and fear of harassment, which is a global phenomenon where women use public spaces and streets. And in that, I think the important thing to measure, and I like the idea, what you're talking about, metrics and measurement, because how do we go beyond pilots? It is really by measuring. It is important to recognize that the lack of safety has repercussions that go much beyond just the fatality or the act of violence or harassment that women face. And what we find that for women is that the lack of safety prevents them from actually equally and equitably accessing the city. We know in India, for example, our streets are extremely male-dominated across, and certainly after dark, it is a very hostile city for women in most places. The second thing we know is that the lack of safety has impacts on the way that women can access education, employment, as well as leisure. So we know India is one of the few countries in the world where women's workforce participation is going down. and we are recognizing that lack of good public transport, lack of safe streets are actually factors which have much, much greater impacts on women's lives and on the life and on the city, on the economy. Because if 18% or 12% in Delhi, it is 12% female labor participation rate. This is an extremely, I think, dire situation that we are in, that among other things, there are other economic issues. I'm not putting it all down to safety, but certainly safety plays an important role. Just to briefly talk about what we've been doing at Safety Pin. Safety Pin, we actually believe that you need to generate data in order to make visible some of these issues in very stark ways. So we have a set of technology tools and apps that we've used over the past 8 years to really work with cities to unpack what are the factors that in fact make a street unsafe for women. This includes physical infrastructure such as lighting, the walkability of the pavement, the availability of public transport, last mile connectivity, but it also includes what we call the social usage of the street and public spaces. So, how do you have eyes on the street? How do you have public spaces that are actually inclusive? And the term that we use really is inclusive and accessible, because what we find is that if you have an inclusion will happen when you have a diversity of voices, when you're designing your streets, when you're designing public transport. If you design public transport for a rush hour in the morning and a rush hour in the evening, who is the user you're thinking of? You're thinking of an able-bodied heterosexual male who goes to work in the morning and comes back in the evening. That represents a very small part of those who use our cities. Like you mentioned in the beginning, Dhaval, only 15%, at max 15% are car users. So therefore, even in public transport, we need to bring in a very diverse set of voices right from the point of planning. Not later on, not include, add few seats for women. That is not going to impact the way that public spaces are accessible to women. So just to quickly share, so some of the work we've done, for example, in Delhi, we worked very closely with the Delhi government to look really at walkability and lighting infrastructure. Now, lighting is a very, very key element that makes public spaces, that transforms public spaces into safer spaces for women to use after dark. And the second one is really of walkability and last mile connectivity. You build metros, at the metro station, you have lighting, you have this thing. But unless a woman is able to walk back home after that, you have not solved the problem. So we've really tried to work with the government to give data about what are the key concerns, what actually prevents women from using the streets, what actually prevents women from feeling safe and feeling equal, because the lack of safety translates into unequal citizenship for women. And I think we need to locate that within a discourse of equality and equitability, and not only safety, because then if we keep it within a very safety discourse, it becomes one of protectionism. How do we protect people? The idea is not to protect. The idea is to have just many more women on the street. Many more women driving buses. And the last thing I'd like to say is we have a range of parameters through which we measure public space. And what we've actually found is that when streets have women moving about freely, even men actually identify those spaces as safer. So the presence of women on a street is a very strong indicator of the fact that that street is safe. So therefore you take a few steps back and say, what are those things you can do to ensure women? And when I say women, I am going to include, the fact that if you say women, you can replace that and say, if you have more children on the street, if you design streets for elderly people to move freely, basically people who are not at the center of the discourse, you start bringing them to the center, and then you actually begin to design streets which are truly equitable, inclusive, And then only we can even begin to talk of transformation. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's all, you know, add and mix changes,
Yeah.
which are not going to be sustainable in the long run.
Yeah. No, Kalpana, I mean, thank you. Sorry to cut. I mean,
No,
thank
I'm sorry.
really valid points. And I'm seeing a series of indicators starting from Professor Varma to you. I'm interested to see where this goes. You know, I'm going to move in the order that I introduced. So I'm going to move to Samarth now. Samarth, over to you. If you could just take sort of 5 minutes to, you know, share your experience through your work and your sort of imagination of a safe street, safe city.
Yeah. Thank you, Dhaval, for inviting me to be part of this session and this panel. Both the speakers before me have, touched upon very, very important points. And apart from us talking to each other in our own little bubble, I hope decision makers and officials higher up take particular interest in the betterment of our city's landscape. Actively participate in these kinds of events. And I really applaud you for this initiative. Truly great. Kelly, also, thank you for setting the tone for the session with the presentation at the very start. So very quick introduction and brief from my end. Our practice, I'm an architect and urban designer, but I do practice with my father, who's an architect. Our practice is PK Das and Associates. We're architects and planners based in Mumbai. And, you know, we've been associated with the protection and expansion of public spaces in the city over the last 25 to 30 years through our engagement in the city and its landscape. Mumbai, as we all know, is one of the lowest open spaces per capita anywhere in the world, maybe probably as low as 1 square meter per person. Compared to cities like New York, which has probably 25 square meters of open space per person, and London, which is 35, which is even higher. So, you know, apart from our architectural work in the public and private sectors with our clients, so to speak, a keen commitment of our practice has always been to contribute to the betterment of our physical environment. And we've done this through several public spaces projects and initiatives where we consciously invest a significant amount of time and resource to collaborate with local citizens.
Samantha, I cannot hear you right now. Samantha? Okay, I guess there's a technical problem at his end. Maybe while Samarth sort of joins back, I sort of in the interest of time, let's sort of move to Sarika. Okay, Samarth is back. Samarth, I can't hear you very clearly. You paused for a while. You there? Yeah, okay. So Sarika, let's move to Sarika then in the interest of time. Sarika, I mean, your work is really interesting and it's sort of, it's, you know, be it open streets or anything, how do you sort of imagine through your work and your experience the city? I mean, I hope to kind of get over this question quickly so that we can talk about scale, because I'm afraid that's all the time we're going to have after that. But Sarika, over to you.
So, you know, adding to what Samarth and Kalpana highlighted and even Dr. Varma highlighted. So, you know, again, to make it happen. So what we did is we took a little different approach, you know, not just the practitioner, not just the architect, urban designer, planner and all. We actually associate with a lot of civic society group here in Gurgaon especially, and then in other cities in Haryana for both Rahagiri and Haryana Vision Zero. And then the most important people, I think, who are the movers and shakers of our cities, who are the corporate giants, you know, the corporate leaders who has this voice of, bringing that changes. So for both our work in Rahagiri and on Haryana Vision Zero, NASCOM was an active partner throughout these 9 years on Rahagiri, and from last 3 years where we implemented Haryana Vision Zero and Punjab Vision Zero. So there is a little difference when we are talking about scaling. So that is how we able to scale it off from the Sunday Rahagiri Day Open Street program, where first time we've introduced, why getting back street from car is so important, why the safer street design is so important, and where we actually emphasize in all these things, which Kalpana said, why women and other gender is equally important to share the street. That we demonstrated through Rahagiri Day, where we can see, almost 50% participation are women at Rahagiri Day, followed by children's. And here I want to add, children's again are most important, road users, especially in Indian cities, where 80% of our children go to government schools, where they don't have public transport system or, personal vehicles to drop them to the school. So most of these children either walk or cycle to the school. So working closely with the schools here, with the government schools here, was also one of our, is also one of our major direction towards achieving what we want to achieve through Vision Zero. And second thing, we had a very top-down approach also, because, this is how it works in India. So the Vision Zero has been launched by the Chief Minister of Haryana. And this is how it rolled it out from 10 districts to 22 districts, where we actually able to achieve that 12% reduction in Haryana. So in road traffic fatalities, where we were able to save some 1,500 plus lives in this 2.5 years in Haryana Vision Zero program. So from the political leadership, corporate leadership, citizens engagement, involving education institute, all these 4 tiers, is important, from pilot, from awareness to scaling it up. Both the projects is a very different component, both the Open Street program and Vision Zero program. I'll add more details into the discussion when we move forward. But I think, this whole equitable street right now that we are discussing, the new terminology, right now, this is, I think, the right way to look into the street, where we are talking about, safer street, converting into an equitable street where, just not public transport. India has paratransit, India has street vendors, and multiple other uses when we are designing a street. So one of such street, actually, we are going to demonstrate for the first time, I think, one of its kind in India, which is the total complete street, the Anath Road project that we are doing with Nagaro and the district administration here in a PPP format, which is again, going to be the most equitable street in next year, I think.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And thanks, Arika. First of all, it's really superb. I mean, 12% reduction. I mean, that is sort of achieving scale. Okay, I have 13 minutes. We'll see if we can take some questions at the end. But before sort of we wrap up the 13 minutes, I really want to kind of, hear from you guys. It's amazing, right? So the church street transformation, Professor Varma, that happened in Bangalore, and kind of, it serves as an amazing demonstration for change that can happen, that it's possible, etc. Or Kalpana, I mean, the work that you've been doing on lighting, etc. Now, in the context of the money that is constantly being spent in doing something or the other on our streets, I mean, it could be anything. Public money spent cannot be respent over and over again on the same part of the street, right? I mean, so the idea is all the efforts that you people are putting, or we are putting, or anyone, it needs to be mainstream, right? I wanted to sort of, the whole point of kind of one of the important things I thought to get from you guys was, how do you think your kind of work can be mainstreamed, can be sustained over a long period of time, which means can be institutionalized? What is sort of, the enabling policies in cities that you're working that you think would need to be changed for your work to be mainstreamed and institutionalized, so that to Kalpana, every street that sort of you're talking about should check all the indicators that you're mentioning. And of course, you'll have to keep monitoring, because it's not like things change and will remain so. So I think, can we take two minutes quickly. So maybe we'll have time for a few questions at the end to kind of hear from you guys about it. We just randomly change the order. Maybe Kalpana, you can start.
Yeah, Dhaval, I've joined
Oh,
back.
okay. Samarth.
Extremely sorry about that. Just some flaky internet issues.
No problem. Samarth, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Sort of to finish your opening.
Yeah, sure. No, so just to say that Jane Jacobs has, I don't know where I got cut off, but I just wanted to say that Jane Jacobs has been kind of inspiration for all of us for many years. Significant public spaces projects in the city such as Bandra Bandstand, Carter Road Promenade, the Juhu Beach redevelopment project, the Gateway of India Public Plaza. These have all been projects that our studio has worked on, and we get inspired by leading professionals from all over the world. Just to kind of wrap up my quick introduction, Dhaval, we advocate the promotion of long, thin, skinny parks and public spaces instead of large central parks that people have to kind of get into a car and drive to, and these long, skinny parks that kind of weave through neighborhoods allow easy access within 5 to 10 minute walks from anywhere in those neighborhoods. And what better vehicle to promote this idea than the very streets in our city, which are sort of completely intertwined into the fabric of the city, and the nallas in Mumbai specifically that spread over 300 kilometers in length through the entire urban fabric of the city. The last initiative I want to talk about quickly, Dhaval, is the Equal Streets movement, which of course you are also a part of, and you along with us and a group of citizens here in Mumbai started the initiative to promote awareness of streets as public spaces, where we look at streets for people instead of roads for cars. And I think that using that motto, we've conducted several successful, I hate to use the word pilot, but successful pilot projects in the city of Mumbai. And we'll come to the reasons why some of that has not been able to go forward. But yeah, I think with that, I just want to quickly wrap up my intro. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Samarth, and thanks. You could quickly join back. I was just telling the other sort of panelists also that we have 10 minutes, Samarth. I wanted to quickly, if we get time to take questions, I think it's fine. So I was just saying, like Professor Varma sort of, and the church street, right? Idea is to demonstrate this church street as a beautiful public street and all. I kind of match all the indicators and all. Like, this work needs to be mainstream. There is money as we speak being spent, and we are talking in Mumbai, we are talking about 1,500 crores every year on street. You cannot keep respending public money, on kind of doing, breaking, etc. if somebody thinks. So this needs to be now mainstream, right? And how do we kind of achieve that through this decade, right? So for people like you and your work to be mainstream, what is sort of the enabling policy kind of changes that you think in your respective cities that you're working, etc., that will help mainstreaming this? We're just randomly going around the room, Samarth. This is 2 minutes exactly. I might just cut you off in 2 minutes, so please forgive me for that. Kalpana, to begin with you.
No, I think, Dhaval, actually, this is the central issue. And I think at this point, this is not mainstreamed yet in government. I think we have to recognize this. Many city governments are willing to do a pilot. They're willing to do it, and most of the time when someone else is willing to pay for it. They're sort of, almost accommodating it. But I don't think it is there is any mainstreaming or any policy which is willing to recognize inclusive, equal streets. At the end of the day, the majority of the infrastructure is being built to move cars faster. So I think that we are up against a very big thing. We are amongst ourselves talking, we speak this language, we are extremely excited when we do something small and we do something which we think is a little bigger, but we have to recognize this is not really transforming our cities yet. And I think, to me, there are two things that are needed. One is, I think many more of us who are working on these kind of things need to work together to push these policies, to advocate for this change, not work in silos, not work just to do small changes in this street and that street and get little glory for ourselves and our organizations. We have to get past that, and we have to really think about how do we address the policy environment, whether it's the master plans, whether it's the, even the smart city mission, the kind of they are not looking actually at equal streets. Their whole notion of safety is a very limited notion of safety, you know. So I think we have a long way to go. I think at every level of policy, from the municipal level to the city, to the state, to the national level policies, whether it's on policies on streets, whether it's on policies on urban development, whether it's master plans, whether it's on safety, a range of things, we need to actually have a much wider voice in actually influencing the way that is. I don't think we are there yet, actually. I think we are still at the pilot stage only.
Yeah. Okay, Kalpana, 20, 30 seconds at best. If you're done, thanks.
Yeah, I'm done. Somebody else can go on. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so moving to Sarika. Sarika, you have 2 minutes.
So actually, what Kalpana said is totally right. You know, of course, we are doing these pilots, and the whole question is how to make it, how to scale it up, and how to make it sustainable. Even in policy, for transport sector, I think we have actually enough policy. Every city has this comprehensive mobility plan, big, you know, this English books, where big like 800 kilometer of cycle track, 500 kilometer of this, and you know, 15,000 buses and everything. It's been going from years. It's almost more than a decade that we all have comprehensive mobility plan. Many cities have this NMT policy. One of such policy we developed for Gurgaon also. Here the bottleneck is implementing those policy. Whatever is documented in that policy, are these cities transforming that into implementation? No. Again, what you said, you know, this 15,000 crore in Mumbai or 5,000 crore in Gurgaon for this whole road infrastructure. So there, you know, where people like us, again, what Kalpana said, you know, working together and, you know, making this happen by giving this technical assistance. We cannot keep on developing by private funding the streets. Absolutely not, actually. One pilot to showcase that, hey, see, this street can be developed like this. That is fine that we are showing a pilot, because the Anath Road story, I want to tell you that, you know, there were 400 fully grown trees, and GM, the agency that was supposed to develop this street, is supposed to cut all these 400 trees and doing the road widening project. There we intervened and said, no, we protest. We said that you cannot cut the trees. And then we said, then what to do? Then we said, okay, let us provide you the design. And then some corporate, you know, committed also, okay, let us showcase that how you can devise a street, equitable street for everyone, where, you know, all road users are accommodating in same way without cutting a tree and having this world-class infrastructure. So this is one demonstration that giving, and it become actually live lab for everyone, including the government engineers, everyone coming and seeing how the work is going. It's a challenge every day. That is one thing. Yeah. So if I have few seconds, so second thing, you know,
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Okay. Second thing, again, political will and providing this again better design part, helping them to invest in right kind of infrastructure. That is also we are working. You know, we are providing all the designs and asking them, please develop invest in right kind of infrastructure. That is another area where we all can pitch in and work with the government.
Interesting. Yes, I mean, policy is there, bottleneck. Professor Varma, quickly, sort of, how do you think you can have many church streets in Bangalore?
Yeah, so I think mainstreaming, first of all, requires right institutional arrangement. The biggest challenge right now we have is this multiplicity of agencies and, you know, overlapping functions with no integration between them. And I think we have spoken a lot about this UMTA, Unified Authority and so on. It has not happened, but unless it happens, you can't really stop these individual agencies from working in silos. For example, in Bangalore, you know, if you go to KRDCL and, you know, if government gives them some project, Karnataka Road Development Corporation, you know, and you go and talk about mode share, that we need, you know, mode share like this, public transport and so on and so on. They said, they will say, oh, my job, our job is to construct roads. That's what we do and that's what we can do. I can't really comment on mode share and other things. So that's how it works. Actually. So unless we break that, thankfully, you know, in recent time, we have got this DMLTA bill now in Assembly, Bangalore Metropolitan Land Transport Authority bill. If that comes up and gets approved, we will first time probably have a body with required teeth to be able to bring these agencies on table and stop them from doing these nonsensical things, one not talking to each other and so on. Even in Mumbai, many of you are familiar with Mumbai. I've spent a lot of time in Mumbai. I've seen, in fact, in your presentation, Dhaval, you were showing a photo of JVLR, outside IIT Bombay campus. I've seen that road, just a 2-lane road, when I was doing PhD at IIT Bombay. And it used to take much lesser time then to reach IIT Bombay campus from Borivali than it takes today after they have widened it to so many lanes.
Yeah.
And shrinking. And similarly, when I was in MMRDA, in the Transport and Communication Division, MMRDA took up this MUTP and MEIP projects, and they, widened this Western and Eastern Express Highway from few lanes to 6, 7, 8 lanes. I don't know how many. By constraining the footpaths, the pedestrian space, as well as the drains, the stormwater drains. And today, it's even more congested than it used to be, at that time. So all this is because the agencies in Mumbai have not talked to each other. PMC, MMRDA, they'll just. So I think right institutional arrangement is one key element to mainstream these pilots into network level initiatives.
Sure. Thank you, Professor Varma. That's amazing. Samar, how can you realize your plan of the sort of the Nala or any of your plans? I've seen a lot of your plans. What will it take for you to do that?
Yeah. I mean, scalability and upscaling and transforming it to the city scale is really the biggest challenge today. I think Dhaval hiding, we all as professionals and activists have also at some level got very comfortable with the idea of a pilot. I think we should stop hiding behind the safety net of a pilot. And unfortunately, the city officials have also used this to their very advantage. They promote a false sense of participation and inclusion by way of promotion of these pilot projects across the city, across any sector, not just public spaces or streets, right? But the minute we talk about upscaling a pilot or, using that concept to transform a larger idea in the city, that's when we're suddenly faced with walls and these kind of, shrugged off and pushed aside. So I think, the earlier speakers have mentioned a couple of very important points that, yes, there should be bodies that are formed that keep not only the people answerable, like the citizens in the city answerable, but also the government officials answerable to certain action, not just false words in public. One of the key initiatives that had really struck a chord with me from my time in New York. New York City has a planning department. We're all very familiar with that. But within that planning department, they have an urban design department. Okay, who's looking at the way people interact with the street or people interact with the city. So what moves do we make to improve that interaction of people within cities and hence improve the quality of life? NACTO, Dhaval, the National Association of, which is based in the US, and they came up with the Urban Design Guide, which is a kind of incredible guideline for design of streets, right? New York City's Urban Design Department has a street pavement design guideline book. I mean, are you kidding me? Here we're like, that's the intensity and commitment that our officials need to have towards improving the city, not just these sort of false words. And finally, just another point is we need to disincentivize private transport. We need to up the ante. We need to push up the taxes for private car owners. We have to disincentivize people from buying their second, their third, their fourth cars, right? These are examples which are readily available now worldwide, where it's almost impossible for you to buy a second car simply because the taxes are that high, right? And use that money and that infrastructure and that effort to provide quality public transport for our city. Not just show the city that we are developing public transport. Oh, look, we're building the metro. Oh, look, we're pushing BRTS. What is the quality of the transport infrastructure that is being provided to us? Can we not upgrade the existing public transport infrastructure to support this larger cause of disincentivizing vehicular transport in the city? These are some of the tangible points that I think we all need to discuss and really seriously take up with the officials.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. We're not going to take questions, I'm sorry. But I feel like these are really interesting points that all of you made, starting from sort of building a guiding coalition. We need so many more voices. We cannot get comfortable sort of with just doing pilots because it's very easy for cities to do. And the right institutional arrangements. I mean, it's seeming very clear that we cannot bypass some of these basic tenets before we can scale. But we also understand the urgency, time is running out. I mean, so yeah, I mean, here's to sort of working on a lot of sort of more projects, perhaps working together. With that, I will conclude this session. And I want to really thank you all for sort of making the time to come to this session and sharing your views. I mean, it was really amazing. I wish we could have talked for a lot more, but we have a really interesting sort of next hour in this session. I hope that you can stay back for it. With that, just thank you very much. And I'm going to now hand it over to Amit to take this session from here.
Thank you very much, Dhaval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dhaval.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Dhaval, for this wonderful panel discussion. And it's great to hear such diverse voices talking about how do we scale up street design in our cities. Okay, so we now move forward and we have a very, very prominent and exciting speaker who's going to join us. He is someone who knows something about scale. So let me introduce Gil Penalosa. Gil is the founder and chair of Canadian nonprofit organization 880 Cities. He's also ambassador of World Urban Parks. He has worked in over 350 different cities in all the continents. And before immigrating to Canada, Gil was the commissioner in Bogota, in Colombia, where he had constructed over 200 parks and has really scaled open street to over 100 kilometers. I had the privilege of speaking to him, talking to him at a Connect Karo in 2013 in Bengaluru, where we saw him in person. But because of the current COVID crisis, he is joining us online. Gil, thanks a lot for joining. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you as well.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to share my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. I think that the idea of how to scale up is absolutely critical because this is an emergency. We really need to move from talking to doing. Let's think that half of the homes that will be around in urban cities in 40 years do not exist today. Do not exist today. You know, today we have about 3.5 billion people living in cities. Within the lifetime of our children, we're going to go to over 7 billion people. That has never happened before and probably will never happen again, that we increase by 3.5 billion people in 40 years. And it could be very nice and civilized, where people walk and ride bicycles and use public transit and everybody can enjoy nature. It could be, it should be, it must be. I mean, in India, over the next 40 years, the population is going to grow by around 300 million people. I live in Canada, in Toronto. This is like 8 times the population of Canada. This is almost the whole population of the US. So in India, you have a magnificent opportunity, but also you have a huge responsibility. Because whatever you do or don't do is how hundreds of millions of people will live for many centuries. For many centuries. So if this is what's going to happen in the next 40 years, let's see what we have done in the last 40. Because if what we've been doing is good, let's just do more of the same. But this is how we've been building cities in the last 40 years. Segregating people, sending the poor people to the worst places with no parks and no trees and no public transit. Even in the US, the wealthiest country in the world, these are cities, the colors are by postal code. Imagine this, that something as basic as the life expectancy. In one postal code, the ones in red is 60 years, while the ones in light pink is 90. How can we even accept that is normal, that someone is going to have a 50% more life expectancy? And of course, in India, you know the issues of segregating and the upper income, the lower income. And this is how we've been doing cities in the last 40 years. So we've been focusing on cars, and not on people's happiness. And this is how we have been trying to solve mobility around the world, because everybody has been copying this model of the US everywhere. The cities do not decide the what, the population, that's more at the national level, but the cities do decide the how. And this is how we have been doing cities. Parks, no, instead of parks, we've been doing parking lots for cars. And imagine the children, the elderly, the people with disabilities, they become almost kind of a slave of someone with a car just to go out for an ice cream. So it is very clear that the last 40 years overwhelmingly has been horrible. There might be very few exceptions, like with acupuncture, but the majority of what we have done around the world in the last 40 or even in the last 80 years has been mediocre, bad, horrible. So we clearly need to improve the cities that we have today. We need to create great cities for many, many more people. We must create our cities radically different. We must plan them. We must manage them radically different. And it doesn't matter if the city has 2,000 people or have 1 million or 5 or 20 million people. The issues are very similar. The solutions, of course, are different, but the issues are similar. And when we were thinking about equity and climate change, and we see the symptoms everywhere, even if some people don't want to believe in them, and we were thinking about the population growth and that we're living longer. By the way, we're living longer, and it's not just in India. It's everywhere. You know, we've been around over 200,000 years. In 200,000 years, up to 200 years ago, there was not a single country with a life expectancy above 45. Today, we don't have one below 45. This is incredible. Maybe the biggest accomplishment ever. In India, India has doubled the life expectancy in the last 100 years. Part of it is because less children are dying, but also the other half is because people are living longer. And when we were thinking about all of these issues, COVID-19 arrived. Some people say that everything changed. I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think much has changed. I think our perception changed. Our perception. It's like if we had gotten some magnifying glasses to see our cities, our issues, and something that were invisible became visible. Around the world, we saw homeless people camping in parking lots, in streets, when the hotels were empty. You know, we saw the lack of equity all over. Also, we saw something good. As people stayed home and there were fewer cars, we saw the impact that it has on the quality of air. Sometimes the quality of air is something that is invisible, but now COVID made it visible. So do we want to go back to this? Or do we want a new and different future? I mean, COVID made it very easy to see how things could be done. So we need to decide, how do we want to live? I think the post-COVID city has to be about health, equity, sustainability. We gotta focus. And when I'm talking about health, I'm talking about the definition of the word health. It's the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and is not merely not being sick. Same thing with sustainability. I'm talking about sustainable happiness, which is the happiness that contributes to the individual, community, or global well-being, as long as it doesn't exploit other people, the environment, or future generations. And when I'm talking about equity, it's about giving everybody what they need to be successful, which is different from equality. Equality is giving everybody the same. This is equality. Someone did this cartoon that I think is really interesting. No, some people are starting so far behind that some might need 2 and 3 boxes, others don't need any box. And someone said, oh, if that is equality, equity, I think this is reality. But I think that at Connect Caro, people are thinking outside the box, and maybe it's not just about moving boxes from one end to the other. Maybe it's about taking down the boxes. It's thinking different options. And of course, we need to ensure equity before we can even think about equality. So we have an opportunity and we have a responsibility. Some people are thinking it's gonna be so easy. Now we're gonna be putting linear parks on top of the streets and we're gonna put trees. By the way, that's what we should be doing, because between 20 and 40% of the cities are streets. It's the public area. It belongs to everybody. So the easiest way to create, and I just saw in the past panel that someone was saying how very little green spaces are in many of the cities in India. Well, we should be taking a lot of that street space to make parks. But unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy, because there's a lot of forces moving in the other direction. We want more cars, more traffic, more isolation, living further away. So how do you want cities in India to become? That is the key element of the scaling now. If we want cities in India to be equitable and sustainable, where all people are going to be able to live healthier and happier. And from a horrible situation, it's also an opportunity. So let's think about this. For example, there were not enough parks, and people said, go to the parks and walk and be physically active, but distance. So people open up the streets. People all of a sudden say streets are public spaces. It really shook people up that it said streets are not just to move cars. Because sometimes when you wanted wider sidewalks or footpaths, when you wanted protected bikeways, they said, oh no, the streets were built for cars. COVID arrived and we started using the streets. In Auckland, New Zealand, we also saw it. You know, the issue of streets as public space is something that is really, really critical. It's public, it belongs to everybody. And it's the largest public space in a city. The streets are are larger than all of the parks, the schools, the libraries. This is Oakland, California. With fewer cars, also people started doing bicycle corridors, interconnecting the whole city with protected bikeways. Because people were not using cars, people were also skeptical of public transit. And all over the world, we saw how, like, overnight, things that used to take years, decades, all of a sudden, it took weeks, it took days, and it transformed how people were moving in the cities. So it showed that it can be done. This is not a technical issue. This is not a financial issue. This is a political issue. And people were doing it. All of a sudden, bus-only lanes. Again, that it could take decades to evaluate these costs, those surveys, then they were being done overnight. So again, not a technical issue, not a financial issue. Markets on the streets. We saw even golf courses, for example, golf courses in San Francisco, they were only maximum 200 people playing one day. They were turned into public parks in 24 hours. So instead of 200 people playing, all of a sudden, thousands of people were enjoying it as a park. I mean, there is no moral or ethical reason to justify a public golf course in any city in the urban area where there is either lack of parks or lack of housing. So these are so, all of a sudden, the impossible seemed possible, and we were so happy. I mean, let's think about of the golf courses. when I was saying that there is no moral or ethical way to justify if you have a deficit of parks or housing. Imagine you didn't have the golf course, you had money. You had money in the bank and you could buy a piece of land, and now you have the land. And in that piece of land, you can do a golf course, or you can do half of it for parks and half of it for housing. What would you do? These are the issues that we need to discuss, is scaling up how we do our cities. I mean, and people that play golf are very powerful. So then they say, no, you can do 10 cricket pitches or half park and half housing. What would you do? I mean, we need to remember that the general interest must prevail over the particular interest if we really want to be happy and move forward. So this is a time of opportunity. When people say that, and when we're talking about sustainable mobility, people say, why move on sustainable mobility? Why? I mean, climate change. I mean, COVID has been horrible, but climate change is a much bigger issue and more difficult to tackle. So this is one of the reasons why we need to move to sustainable mobility. Some people say, why walking? Well, walking because every single trip begins by walking. We walk to places, we walk to the bicycle, we walk to public transit, we walk to the private cars. I mean, walking and cycling is not a joke. This could be any city. You know, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. And I've seen when I've been in India, and I hope to go because I would love to go and travel and have these kind of conversations, but in longer master classes and sessions with decision makers. And I saw so many people walking and so many people cycling. Walking and cycling are the only individual mode of mobility for most people in India and around the world. Walking and cycling is the only mode of mobility for children and youth. If you're under 16, the only mode of individual mobility is to walk and bike. So having safe and enjoyable ways to walk and ride bicycles should be like a human right. Unless you think that only the people that have cars have a right to individual mobility. That's why we're talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is really mixed. Again, we need to think, how do we want to live? That is the key element. I mean, if walking, just like the birds fly, people, we walk, and we walk even in horrible weather that like this that you don't have in India. I mean, when we're walking, we probably are so happy because we use all our senses. We see the children playing, the youth going to school, we hear the birds singing, we're going from a coffee shop and we smell the aroma. Parents and children walk, grandparents walk, we walk in the summer, we walk in the winter, but we need to make it safe. And I just heard in the previous panel that in India, about 62 people die walking every single day, killed by car drivers. Walking is not safe. I mean, a couple of years ago, 2 planes fell and everybody crashed and everybody died. 2 planes. And around the world, what happened when those 2 planes crashed? All of the 737s were grounded. All the presidents, all the governments. Well, every single day, people driving motor vehicles, people driving cars killed the equivalent of 5 Boeing 737s. 5 yesterday, 5 today, 5 tomorrow. We know what needs to be done to end this massacre, but we are not doing it. They're not accidents. Accidents when they could not be avoided. They're incidents and they can be avoided. I mean, we know what needs to be done. There's the complete streets. This is not a technical issue. We know what needs to be done. We need to have a shared value that life is sacred. Life is, and also that every life matters. I remember when I was in Mumbai talking with the mayor, and I was talking about pedestrians being killed, and he got up and showed me on a map a train line, and he said, in this train line, 11 people die every day. I thought I had wrong, and I said, what, every year? He said, no, every day, over 4,000 per year. How could you be investing billions in highways and things before you eliminate these 4,000 people being killed? No, because they are very, very, very poor. Then sometimes people don't seem to care. I imagine if instead of 11 a day poor people, if there was 1 a day of the wealthy people, something would be done about it. But if it's 11 a day of the poor, So we need to have a shared value that every single life matters. I mean, if we're going to improve walking, we know we need to lower the speed. All of the roads on the city should have a maximum of 30 kilometers an hour, except some large arterials, we might be 40 or 50. But this should be an idea. I mean, and there are cities moving in that direction. Bilbao in Spain recently did it. Paris is doing it, and other cities are doing it. And not because 30 sounds nice. It's because if you get hit by a driver at 30 kilometers an hour, there's only 5% probability of being killed. At 50, it's over 85%. And there are many, many studies that show the same thing. This is really an issue of life or death, the speed of the cars. I mean, if we just have a small island on a crosswalk, we eliminate more than half of the incidents. Why are we still doing crosswalks without an island? The kids on a field trip, they're on crossing one light, half of them wait, and then they continue, and it's gonna be safe. We need to think. I mean, there are some basic, I mentioned this is because just to reiterate that it's not a technical issue. It's because we need to have people first, and most cities do not have people first. And this is how we do sidewalks. It's because we don't have people. We do some bridges, spend a lot of money. That's for the cars. Don't ever let anybody tell you that that bridge was built for pedestrians. Don't even call it a pedestrian bridge. It was built so that cars can go faster without waiting for. Do a good and level crosswalk. Don't do the ones that they do in Russia under the road, or do the ones that they do sometimes in the US or Australia above the road. This is in Argentina. It doesn't make sense. The only one that is going to use it is the dog. So the sidewalks here are absolutely critical, and we need to make those sidewalks so much better. Sometimes we don't even do sidewalks. We're telling this woman every day, you are a second-class citizen, when we don't do sidewalks. I mean, the sidewalks, we were told go on the streets, but be 2 meters apart. The sidewalks were not even wide enough for that. I mean, the sidewalks is the most important infrastructure in a city, because while you're on the street, on bicycles, on public transit, on cars, you're going from point A to point B. Not on the sidewalk. On the sidewalk, you meet your neighbors, you meet people selling flowers and fruits and vegetables. People meet boyfriends and girlfriends. The sidewalk is almost part of the family of the parks. We use the sidewalks in the summer. We use them in the winter. The children catch Pokemons in the sidewalks. We catch public transit. The sidewalk is probably the most important infrastructure in cities. We need to have great sidewalks everywhere. The sidewalks reminds us that walking is much more than walking. When I work in Argentina, it's nice to see people dancing tango in the sidewalks. The sidewalks are almost like parks. But of course, we need to have this area for the car, public transit, and physically separated for bicycles and physically separated for cars. Because sustainable mobility is not just walking, it's riding bicycles, using public transit, and new uses of cars. And from the point of view of riding bicycles, we need to improve. And anything that you think about bicycle, anything, if it's not safe for an 80 and an 80-year-old, is nothing. Don't even call it a bikeway. It's nothing if it's not safe. Everything, think of this, think of the children, think of the older adults. I mean, this painted line might be okay for a experienced cyclist, but it's not gonna be okay for the children. So we need to develop networks of protected bikeways. I call them AAA, for all ages and abilities, because connectivity is critical. If you just do small pieces that don't connect anything with anything, people are not gonna use it. You gotta think of daytime and nighttime. You gotta have this physical separation. And if you don't have the money for the physical separation, don't just paint the line. Enhance the painted line with bollards every 2 meters or every 6 feet. And that's why people bike in Copenhagen, because there is connectivity, there is a complete network. And when we talk about public transit, to improve public transit, someone said a civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. We need to have public transit of quality for everyone. And part of this is marketing, is the name of the transit, the color, the uniform, the position. And a mayor told me his citizens didn't like the regular bus, so he put a nose on the buses, he covered the wheels, and now they look like trains, and the citizens love those buses. So part of it is marketing. In public transit, we need speed, frequency, and connectivity. If we don't have those, people are not going to use it. Speed, frequency, and connectivity. And that's when we do, physical space for public transit, do the mobility math. Do you want one of these or 140 of those? It's very simple. 101 of those or 145 of the cars. And we have seen how it works. Rapid transit is not if the wheels are rubber or metal. Rapid transit is if it has dedicated lanes. It must have dedicated lanes. Also prepaid fares, easy, quick and out, traffic signal priority. But it's not about the wheels. We know walking, cycling, and transit takes up a lot less space. The Olympic Games just happened in Tokyo. How did people get around? The main new lanes were BRTs in Tokyo. There are some elements such as capacity, capital cost, operating cost, but this is not technical issue. We know all of this. We have the studies. We don't need to do more studies. We know the issues of quality of air. We need to know the issues of vulnerability, how the most vulnerable is the pedestrian, then the cyclist, also how the most environmentally friendly. We know the capacity, and for example, we know the BRTs that have double lane on the stations so that the express lines can pass the local lines. They move twice as many people as light rail. So these are not financial issues. We know the cost and the benefits. So again, it's not a technical, it's not a financial issue. This is what we should be thinking, like this decision in Nairobi. If they only had $1 billion, what would they do? They could do 86 kilometers of bus rapid transit, or 22 of light rail, or 9 of metro. So if you don't put all of the URX, all of the budget in something that is not going to cover, where is it going to be more efficient? So it's not a technical, it's not a financial, it's a political issue. You need to raise the level to make the politicians go for public transit and to stop working on issues around the private car. So of course, there are some challenges. When India, these are some images. You know much better than me. These are just some simple images, but how people allow their cars on the sidewalks. And that's a normal practice in the different cities that I've been to India, where there is no flat sidewalk to go to. And people tell me, oh, but almost no one uses bicycles. Bicycles seem invisible because they don't have infrastructure, but all of a sudden they are everywhere. When I started looking at, and if you had protected networks of protected byways, it would be fantastic because the weather is amazing and most cities are pretty flat. And even the ones that are not, now you have the e-bikes, and also people use bicycles for work, for mobility, men, women, everybody. This could be amazing. And also the public transit, there are different ways. We need to focus on equity, giving everybody, the girls, the people coming out of the classes, the students come out of class, and people move in different ways. The connectivity with the train stations and in different modes, that is also something important. How are they going to relate? How are you going to deal with the issue of equity? It's not about getting into the buses on the middle of the streets. So of course, this can be improved substantially. Of course, there is no city in the world that have solved mobility through the private car. None. So you have some public, I just saw in one of the previous presentations, so I put this screen here. No, none of those cities, none of them are going to solve mobility through the private car. No one has done it. And every city in the world has tried in the last 100 years. So stop destroying cities by just building one more lane, or a second floor or a third floor. It has not worked. Only through public transit. So the investment must be focused on public transit. And don't talk about public transit or mobility, talk about the benefits. If you have safer streets and safer cities, it's going to be good for culture, it's going to be for the education, recreation, environment, mobility, health, economic development. talk about the benefits, whatever the politicians are interested, talk about that. Let me go fast through some practices on scaling it up. When I talk about some other practices, don't say, oh, but we are not like that. Don't worry. It's not about copy and paste like on the computer, but you can adapt and improve. For example, Copenhagen and the oil crisis. We know that Copenhagen, they bike, and this is how kids should be going to school in India, everywhere. I mean, Copenhagen, for example, why do they bike? It's because it's safe, it's inexpensive, and it's connected. Even though they have horrible weather. In Copenhagen, the winter is cold, the summer is hot, and it rains and rains and rains all year round. Nevertheless, people use their bicycles. They say there's no such thing as bad weather, it's bad clothing. And then they go on and then they back. And cities in India could be as good as Copenhagen if you build safe networks of protected bikeways. And it's completely doable. So these are the kind of things. There's absolutely no reason. This is a lot cheaper than doing. Already 41 out of 100 people are using bicycles, and they want to go to 50%. And they don't need special shoes or things like that to make it really, really nice. And they continue to improve the facilities with new bridges and lights. And this is the mode of mobility of Copenhagen. So when we are talking about civilized, don't look at the US as the model of mobility. The US is horrible from the point of view of mobility. But what I want to highlight also is people say, oh, why is Copenhagen so nice? It's because those Vikings are so different. No, they went from a crisis. There was an oil crisis in the 1970s, and similar to with COVID, people could not use the cars, or only odd place on one day, even place on the other, and people started biking. But since there was no good infrastructure, a lot of children were being killed. Same thing happened in Amsterdam and in Copenhagen. And every time someone would die, there were huge demonstrations in front of City Hall. Someone dies today, the next day at 5:30 in the afternoon in front of City Hall are dying. And they put a lot of pressure on the politicians to build infrastructure. And when they started building infrastructure, the first project in Copenhagen was 19. This is not just for Paris. Any city in India can do it. And Paris is doing it. And now they're talking about the 15-minute city where all the basic design a good street, you will design a good city. So this is the kind of ideas that they were doing. Look at what happens when you plant trees. You need to plant trees everywhere in India. Trees is critical for the environment, for climate change, for the quality of air, for people to walk on the shade. And these are the kind of things they're doing. But from Melbourne, I want to mention this. Mobility and land use are two sides of the same coin. So what are they talking? They're going to grow from 5 million, the metropolitan area, to 10 million. How do you in the existing footprint? In the existing footprint, in 7.5% of that existing footprint, first stop sprawl, but also move. This is how it is today with a lot of sprawl. So they're saying, okay, the arterials that are moving out, let's see, not the parks, not the museums, not the schools, but everything else. Wherever you can have a bus rapid transit or a light rail, any place where you can have public transit, allow it to densify. And that's how they're gonna move, and not with gigantic buildings, all of them between 5 and 8 stories. But you get the same density, whether you got 40-story buildings every other block, than you get 5 to 8 next to each other on this arterial. So the houses in the middle are not being touched, except to plant more trees and more green roofs and so on. Look, this is how it looks like today, and this is how it would look. It's a win-win for everyone. So let's densify in the existing arterials, and let's put bus rapid transit and other areas of mobility. And this is doable. It's about closeness, connectivity, public spaces. I mean, when you have a dense city, if you densify, eventually everything can work. Sustainable mobility, health, housing, parks, climate change. But sprawled cities, nothing will work. So we really need to work on that density. Keep in mind, these are 10 different ways to densify. People hate the 40-story building. Okay, don't do 40-story buildings. Do 5 to 8 stories, but next to each other. And you're gonna get exactly the same density. Oakland, US. Yeah, Oakland, US. In 24 hours, they created the slow streets during COVID. What is the slow? 115 kilometers. They said, the streets, if people are going from point A to point B, they should use arterials, not small neighborhood streets. So they said no one can go into the neighborhood street, only the people that live on the neighborhood street. So then they closed the neighborhood streets to through traffic. All of a sudden, those streets became public space for children to play, for older adults, for people with disabilities on wheelchairs or blind or any. And it's so simple that it's completely doable. It improved only for local transit. So now they have cleaner air, less noise, it's safe for everybody. And now the mayor said that 90% of those slow streets, of those 150 kilometers, are gonna be permanent. Permanent as public space for the area that lives on the neighborhood street. Again, it's doable any place in India. Nairobi is so, I love it. It has so many good things, but walking is not a priority. Look at this. The people who use cars is only 13%, 40% walk, and the others either use bicycles or buses. And these are some of the avenues, 8, 12 lanes for cars with no sidewalks, with no protected bikeways. And now they are doing a horrible elevated highway because the Chinese government is funding it. It doesn't matter. Sooner or later, everybody's gonna pay for it, financially, environmentally, in health costs, in every way. So we really need to focus on the most vulnerable people, and we really need to provide the walking infrastructure, because infrastructures creates culture, creates dignity. And that's, when we were talking about sidewalks, this is before and after. We really need to work on the issue of the sidewalks. The ciclovia. The ciclovia is something that I thought of Central Park when I was commissioner in Bogota, and I saw how Olmsted, 150 years ago, created Central Park in New York. He said he needed places where people could meet as equals. And then I said, anybody could have a Central Park from the point of view of social integration and physical activity. And I took a small program with a few kilometers and a few thousands people, and we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. Every Sunday of the year, on holidays, we open streets to people, we close into cars, and the magic happens. Young and old and rich and poor connecting the different parks. People come, it's not to raise young and old, you see 3, 4 generations at the same time enjoying this public space that belongs to everybody. 120 kilometers. This is, you get men and women, rich and poor, and it's great. 1 out of 4 people in the city come out every single Sunday. Why is it important? Because it's changing minds. It reminds that the streets are public spaces. And see, small cities, medium cities, the large cities like LA, cities are doing it everywhere. This is also about social integration, and that is critical. In Delhi, I mean, I've seen in India how it took off, and it's magnificent. Paris is doing it everywhere. We meet each other as equals. This is the only place in Bogota, for example, where the wealthiest people, the CEOs, presidents, the owners of the large corporations and their minimum wage workers meet as equals with each other's families. You know, this is the map. The colors are by income level. It existed when I became commissioner only in the upper, middle, and upper class. I connected the poorest neighborhoods of the city. I thought that was important to connect everybody with everybody. You know, and in India, Ragari Day. Oh, Ragari Day is magnificent. I think you should have this everywhere in every city in India, and hopefully interconnected city-wide, connecting the wealthy and the poor and the young and the old. I love the different programs. I mean, it's everything. The common denominator is streets and public space and physical activity. That is the common denominator. In Ragiri Day, you also take advantage to ask about mobility options, about public health. I remember seeing this circle and I said, what are they doing? And they said, oh, they're doing laughing yoga, get in. And I got in and it's magnificent. Within 5 minutes, you are laughing. Within 15, you are totally relaxed. And back to Bogota, you know, when my brother was mayor, he's been mayor twice. In the first time, he built 280 kilometers of protected byways in 3 years. Bogota is very poor. If Bogota can do it, cities in India can do it. You need the network. Look at these very, very poor neighborhoods, how they transform when you have really good quality byways and good quality sidewalks with trees and lights. Look at the street on the side for cars. It's not even paved. So there was money either for people walking and cycling or for cars. And then it was improved from people walking and cycling. And there has been hundreds of kilometers. There are many different options, but always separating the people riding bicycles with the people on cars. So the physical separation is absolutely critical for this to click. Now there's about 540 kilometers of protected lanes and 850,000 daily trips. There's more daily trips than the total population of Copenhagen. So it's 200,000 of those are women. It's not 50-50 because it's still not safe enough. It needs to improve to be completely safe. When it's totally safe, it's 50-50 men and women. And now with COVID-19, the city did some temporary additional lanes, and the bicycle share increased from 9 to 13%. We'll see what happens after the COVID. He also did, when he started talking about bus rapid transit, there was not major city in the world that had bus rapid transit. People say, what, like a subway, but above ground? This was the previous transportation system. In 36 months, when we're talking about scaling up, this is in 36 months from idea to implementation, even taking down lots of houses on side and side to be able to create space for the sidewalks, for the protected bikeways. And this is so critical. For example, this line moves more people than 90% of the subways of the world. If you have money and you're gonna do one line of subway and you're gonna do 1 kilometer, you can do 8 kilometers of bus rapid transit, of quality bus rapid transit. And then this is also important because this is about democracy. It's very critical that when you look at the constitution of the world, they say all people are equal. Well, if all people are equal, then 80 people on a bus should have the space of 80 cars with one person. That's why it's about human rights and about democracy to have dedicated lanes. And this is when I was saying, if you come to the station and you got a second lane around the station, then you can have some that don't stop only every 5 or 6 stations, are express, while others stop at every station. Here there used to be 6 lanes for cars. Now 0 lanes for cars, only for bus rapid transit. So this, and in the last term that he ended a year ago, he purchased almost 600 electric buses, the largest fleet between North, Central, and South America. Also purchased almost 1,500 new 2- and 3-body buses, with almost all of them gas or the lowest grade of diesel, and the pollution went from 1.8% to 0.3%. And electric cable cars, and also an electric elevated subway, metro, designed, contracted, and under construction. This is scaling up. So on an emerging city, is this even ethical? When you look at this, this is what's happening in many emerging cities. Investing billions and billions. This is what the many in world banks and international banks and regional banks and all of these are funding, or the Chinese government and other governments are funding. We know that no city has some mobility through private cars. All of these highways are splitting communities, splitting people, and no one has sole mobility through the private car. And you are seeing this construction all over India. It's being built so fast that it even breaks down before it starts to work. Instead of doing roads at level with lanes for BRTs and wide sidewalks and bikeways, this is totally doable. When people around the world are moving roads for cars and making it for people, like this one in Shanghai, in Delhi, in Seoul, South Korea. In Seoul, South Korea, it used to be a river. They put 6 lanes. It got full of cars. They did a second floor. It got full of cars. They said the car owners wanted a 3rd level. The mayor said no. He took down the 2nd, the 1st. He brought out the river. 13 kilometers through the middle of Seoul. 13 kilometers. People said, Mayor, people are not going to stop for coffee, as if they were going to stop for coffee at 100 kilometers an hour. Now they stop because there's 13-kilometer linear path through the middle of the city. It takes guts and vision. This is important. You got to move from the left to the right. You got to have vision and action and passion and perseverance and guts. But it's doable in any city in India. In any city, do it. Aarhus in Denmark, there used to be a river, they put a road, now they took out the road, they brought back. So this is how to attract and retain. This is Portland, this is Madrid, Spain. This is what is happening around the world, New York, this is Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain. Look at this wonderful. Who's gonna live better, the previous city or the new city? Exactly the same roads. This is, I wanna end by saying this is about change. Clearly, we must change. Remember the magnifying glasses to see the cities, the post-COVID cities around health, equity, and sustainability, that we need to plan, manage cities differently. There's not going to be a Martian coming down to fix the cities in India. Change is hard. That's why we don't change. We end up doing the same. But this crisis can be a magnificent opportunity. Keep in mind 3. Change is not unanimous. There will always be people against it. So when politicians say not everyone is on board, no, it will never be everybody on board. Second, the general interest must prevail over particular interests. And third, the cost of doing nothing is not nothing. It's huge for climate change, for mental health, for physical health, in every way. So we need to change. It's not a technical, it's not financial. It is about policy, but not from political parties. Every political party should be on board on these issues. It's about values. It's with a big P. Everybody needs to participate. Please be bold. Benchmark with cities that are better than you. Do alliances with public health and environment and business and libraries and public, private NGOs, and develop a shared vision. But vision is not enough. You need action, action, action. And when you have shared vision and lots of action, then you move from talking to doing. And you create cities that are equitable and sustainable, where people are going to live healthier and happier. So connect, Caro. Let's do it now. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gil, for this incredible presentation. It's always a delight to hear you speak on this critical issue of equity, of justice, of sustainability. And I think I really like the concluding part where you said, let's do it. It's time for action. So a couple of questions I'll pose, and these questions often keep coming. So one is, a lot of times when you give an example that benchmark with cities which are slightly better than you. And then the question is, what about weather? So how do you respond to this question of weather, that India being hot and humid country, whereas the European countries are cooler in nature? So what's the importance of weather in these kinds of street design?
What is the importance of what? Sorry?
Weather, the climate.
Does climate play an important role?
Well, the climate is important. The weather is always an excuse. People say, oh, it's too hot or it's too cold or it's whatever. No, climate is something that you cannot do anything about it. It is what it is. So learn to work with it. For example, if you had hot weather, you can learn things, adapt from things such as Melbourne. Melbourne has been able to lower the city temperature by about 5 degrees through planting trees. I saw some images where they had all of the streets without trees. All of the sudden they planted trees and the temperature went down. Also, you had shade, so it's easier to walk and to ride bicycles. And also in bicycle, if you bike slowly, keep in mind the distances usually are very short. Even in a country like the US, where the cities are very sprawl, more than half of the trips are less than 5 kilometers. So yes, you might not do on bicycle a 60-kilometer trip. When you work 60 kilometers, then you're gonna do from home to public transit on bicycle, then you take public transit, and then you might also do bicycle the rest. But you are gonna need to combine. Also walking, when half of the trips are less than 5 kilometers, many of them are walkable. But we need to make walking safe. And we need to have that shared value that every life matters. So we need to invest in sidewalks. The sidewalks cost a fraction. Sometimes cities say, oh, we did the road, but we didn't have budget for sidewalks. Well, how is it that you got budget for 8 lanes for cars and you didn't have budget for sidewalks? Then you should have done only a 6 lane for cars and have had space for sidewalks. So I think we need to eliminate that issue. Look, if the weather was an issue, the most cycling-friendly city in the world would be LA, Los Angeles, because people say, oh, it needs to be flat, it needs to have nice weather, it needs to have big roads. Well, LA has the big roads, the flat, and the nice weather, and nevertheless it's horrible because they have not built infrastructure. You need infrastructure. The only thing that increases cyclists in India or anywhere in the world is to lower the speed in the neighborhood streets to 30K and to create a network of protected bikeways. It's not about doing bicycle parking. It's not about racks on the buses. It's not about classes. It's not about maps. None of those. All of those things make it nicer for the 2% that are already cycling. To increase is only slow speed limit in the neighborhoods and do networks of protected bikeways. It has to be a network, because if you don't bike because you are afraid, and now 30% of your trip is safe, but the other 70% is not, you're still not gonna do it. So we really need to have very clear that it's about walking, cycling, and public transit. The car, no city in the world has some mobility through the private car, and still in India are doing many elevated highways, many widening roads. And that is like the common saying that it's like fighting against obesity by loosening your belt. It doesn't work.
Thanks a lot, Gil. Absolutely. You're totally spot on. One more question we have got from an audience, and this is, can you tell a little more about how you were able to expand Ciclovia to 120 kilometers? Because while Indian cities do have Rahagiri days and equal streets and happy streets and so on and so forth, but these are still pilots, 10, 15, 20 kilometers. So how can we scale to this 100 odd kilometers? If you could elaborate.
To the benefits, whether you are going to promote sidewalks or protected byways or public transit or Ciclovia on Sundays, don't talk about sidewalks, don't talk about cycling, talk about the benefits. That Ciclovia is about integrating, having a city where the wealthiest and the poorest meet as equals. Think about what matters to people. In some cities, it's about economic development. So tell them, look, if we want to attract and retain people want to live in a cool city. So do this because this is fun and exciting. Maybe a decision maker cares about public health. So tell them how, when you do Ciclovia on Sundays, the quality, you can measure the quality of the air at 11 o'clock on the street with no cars. And then on Monday, same place, 11 o'clock, and you're gonna see, so people are gonna have much cleaner air. So you can talk about physical health, you can talk about mental health, or you can talk about mobility. All of a sudden, when you do that, people realize, wow, the distances are not that long. I thought that it was very, very long. Yeah, because they used to get on a car and it used to take them 40 minutes on a traffic jam to get from point A to point B. When they get on a bicycle with no cars, all of a sudden it's only 10 minutes. So they say, oh, if there were protected bikeways. So it's also a nice way. So I would say the theme is to talk to people is about the benefits. It's not about just getting the cars out. And also about equity. Those streets are public space. They belong to everybody. So let's keep that in mind, that it is the largest public space in any city in India and any city around the world are the streets. So we're not even saying use the street 24 hours, 7 days a week. No, we're just saying, okay, let's do it for 10 hours on Sundays. The other thing is that you don't shut down the city. Because all the main intersections remain open. So when the light changes, people cross. It's not like when you do a marathon, that when you do a marathon, you need to shut down because you are not gonna stop runners because the light change. So everything continues to work. There are parallel roads where people can go, and it's about everybody enjoying. So I would say that more than anything I was obsessed with the idea. Almost in any activity that you're gonna do, you need a few people that are obsessed, crazy, that you think about it. Think about priorities. And I think that needs to be scaled. We really need to work on the fact that pilots, there's too many cute pilots around the world. We don't need cute pilots anymore. You should be doing pilots if and only if that pilot is going to teach citizens about possibilities on open streets or sidewalks or intersections or whatever, or because if the pilot works, then you're going to be able to expand it citywide to 100, 500 different places. Because otherwise it's just good. Otherwise, sometimes it becomes counterproductive because then the mayor say, oh, you see, we're doing, did you go to that intersection? Yeah, but that's one intersection. You need to do 1,000 intersections for this to work. The same thing with the open street. Let's connect people because also that connectivity is something that is really, really critical. And it's very inexpensive. I mean, all you need to do is to close the streets to cars, so a network of streets or a few networks so that people can connect to each other. You don't need to build arenas, you don't need to build gymnasiums. And the last point is that it's very low risk. Tell the elected officials, say, let's do it for 1 year. If it doesn't work, okay, we don't do it again the next year. But if it works, then we do it indefinitely, and also we continue bigger and bigger and bigger each time. So the risk is very low and the potential benefit is very high. Those are some of the ideas. But I mean, whatever we do, this is a moment of urgency. Whatever we do in this 2020, 2030 around the world is going to be critical. I mean, things like COVID showed us the quality, the cities, the air that what seemed almost invisible, then it showed us how visible it is with cars, without cars. They're doing the networks of protected bikeways. So we need to move in the right direction. This is not a time for citizens to be spectators. We need citizens going to public meetings, citizens sending emails to elected officials, citizens participating in advocacy, in activism, joining community groups. I think all of that is very important. And I think that groups like WRI, I think you need to work also with mayors that are on board, because sometimes I find that I love things to be bottom up, but the reality is that there is no support from top down. It doesn't click. So don't waste your time initially with mayors that are totally opposed to your ideas. I mean, try to educate them, try to get them on board, but focus the emphasis of the Bloomberg cities and WRI and everyone on the cities, because once people see cities transformations, they say, oh, I want to be like that city. So if you see, if the stars are aligned in a specific city, do as much as possible, because the stars, they'll become unaligned very, very fast. So if you see the mayor and citizens and NGOs that are come on board, do as much as possible. I mean, this is 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we're not talking about these issues. Now everybody's talking about it, but very few are doing, very few are doing. Remember that when the 1970s, the oil crisis, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, many of these cities went from crisis to transformation. Most of the cities did not. In the US, they started doing small cars like the Ford Pinto, and they started turning down the lights, and they lowered the speed on the highways. When the oil crisis ended, within 5 years, they had gone back to life as it was before. Unfortunately, almost the same thing is happening with COVID. Almost every city, when you look at the budgets, when you look at where cities are investing now, it looks like more cities want to be more like they were in 2019, a failed urbanism and failed mobility, than to really build back better. Build back better has become a nice slogan, but very few are implementing. I mean, I show some examples like Paris and Auckland that are doing. That's what every city in India should be doing. This is a great opportunity, but it will not happen by itself. All of you, everybody together needs to push it in a clear direction of sustainability, equitable and sustainable cities.
Absolutely, Gil. And on that note of equitable and sustainable cities, once again, we'd like to thank you for this great presentation and taking some of your questions. I met with you, as I said, in 2013, and we saw Ragiri Day in Gurgaon and some of the other places. And I really look forward to having this conversation in person again in the near future. So thanks again for joining us, Gil.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do around the world, but specifically across India.
Yeah, thank you. So with this, so it's very hard for me to close this conversation and provide any concluding comments because of such a diverse and great speakers we have had. But luckily, I have with me Claudia, who would do the formal closing and give concluding thoughts. Many of you know Claudia. Claudia Adriazola has worked in the transport sector for almost 20 years. She's currently Director of Health and Road Safety at WRI Center for Sustainable Cities, and she focuses on intersection of sustainability, climate change, public health, and equity. So Claudia, the floor is yours, and your job is to provide concluding thoughts and close this session.
Thank you very much, Amit, and everyone that is joining today. What an honor to wrap up this amazing panel. You know, we had local people joining us, Professor Varma, Sarika, Kalpana, Mr. Das. Of course, Kelly Larson was with us, and Jill Peñalosa. Really, your speech was amazing, Jill, and so complex as transport is. But I have a couple of thoughts that I want to pull from that. You have mentioned a crisis, and it is a crisis. As soon as we step out of our door in the mornings, we can see how challenging it is to navigate in transport. There is congestion that takes hours, and the poorer you are, the longest your commute will be. Air quality, you know, in 2019, before COVID-19 hit us, people in Delhi were breathing air that was comparable to smoking 50 cigarettes a day. And traffic fatalities, right, taking the life of 1,350,000 people a year. So it is a crisis, but I love the word crisis with the characters in Chinese, because there are two characters, and one of them means danger, and the second one means opportunity. We are always at an intersection where we can take that opportunity and move forward with changes that we need. We are scaling up, as our colleagues Dawal and Amit has asked us, how can we really go from knowing these small projects work to scale? And for that, I want to give you an example that I really like, and it's from the Netherlands. A young journalist, Bing Langehoff, in 1972, he was biking one morning with his little daughter. She was 6 years old when she was killed by a car. And he was profoundly affected by this, as you can imagine, and he started writing these articles that were called Stop Murdering Our Kids. He was reflecting and thinking, you know, it's so painful. There is no way to keep our kids safe but putting them in cars, putting them in buses. We should not allow them to have these high risks. The Dutch society came back and said, no, we don't want our kids to be in these metal boxes. We want our public space. At that time, from 3,500 people that will die in the Netherlands in traffic crashes, 450 were children. What is the situation today? In the 70s, the United States and the Netherlands had about 12 people per 100,000 killed in traffic crashes. Today, that number has stayed stable in the United States. Some years goes up. In the Netherlands, it has dropped to 3 people that die over 100,000. How many kids? From 450, now is 20. And of course, there is an impossible, acceptable number, and they continue working on that. But what we see in terms of sustainable mobility is that 50% of all the trips in the Netherlands are by bike. And the statistic that I love the most is that the Dutch children are the happiest in the world because they can be physically active, they can be more independent, and they are safe. So when we reflect about this and we start thinking about our cities and how we can scale up, we heard a lot from our local experts and international experts. We have heard from Kelly Larson that political will they said, okay, this makes sense. What do we do? My recommendations are, number one, quick speed limits. Speed limits can enable to have more walking, more cycling, more kids, more women on the streets using our cities. Right now, speeds are set, of course, for the cars. Who can run at 50 kilometers per hour? Who can run at 30 kilometers per hour? That's not human. We cannot absorb that energy chance. We are hit by a vehicle. So that's the number one. The second one, when you are working on your speeds, get together with your community. We have heard that from Professor Varma, from Sarikapanda. We are totally disconnected. This is silos. I am in charge of doing the infrastructure. I'm sorry I cannot talk to you about planning. I like this walking and cycling thing. I like mass transportation. I hate to breathe bad quality of air, but this is only my little piece and I cannot do anything. So we need to put these pieces together. And that Bangalore Assembly, I hope it comes through because it will be a very important example in India to show how we can get coordinated and get things done. Good targets. Right now, we really need it, not only because we have a tremendous challenge with road safety, with equity, but climate change. I completely agree with you, Jill, that if COVID-19 has been and is still extremely painful for us, climate change will be even worse. So we know that in the transport sector, 25% of the gas house emissions are produced, and we can do something about that when we build these cities that are more equitable and that provide really for everyone that want to use it. Investment. Where your work is, your money should be. So we have to start following up on where are those investments going. And normally it's kind of a numb type of process of decision making. Whatever you did the previous year, that is what you do in your budget next year. Well, things are different. And if we want different things, the resources have to be invested differently. With that, I just want to tell you that people love cities. They keep coming to them. In the year 2000, there were 370 cities with 1 million people. In the year 2018, that number has climbed to 570 cities of 1 million people. People come to cities to look for good life, for good fortune. They want better quality of life. But good fortune, as Edison said, is what happens when opportunity meets planning. So we need to plan carefully for what we don't want and to put at the center what we want, better quality of life for all. Thank you very much, Amit, and thank you very much for all of you to participating today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. And with this, we come to the end of this session. Thanks a lot to all the panelists for joining. And we look forward to tomorrow, the last day of our annual conference, Connect Karo. See you soon. Take care. Bye.